Overview of Oracle Enterprise Project Management Solution. This is quite a big topic in itself, so I have structured it such that I'm going to first explain you the number of modules that goes into Oracle's Enterprise Project Management Solution, and then we will move towards the main business process flow, and then I'm going to take you through a number of forms in Oracle eBusiness Suite applications to briefly tell you the functionality. Alright, so let's get first started through the modular solution of Oracle Enterprise Project Management. So here you can see the number of modules I have listed. These are all a part of Oracle Project Management Solution. So the first one is Oracle Project Foundation, under which you basically set up and configure your project management suite. As such, I've listed it as a module, but its functionality is something shared across all other modules that are listed over here. This includes like defining your project templates, your project resource list, your project resources, your resource rates, your costing methods, and so on. So this is the biggest task while you are setting up and configuring the entire project management. Then once you have done that, then it's time to execute it. And that's where the project costing, billing, resource management, and project management module comes into picture. These are the main 4 modules, but they are complemented with these other 2 modules. So the way it works is, let's take as an example an implementation project for, let's say, a web development. And as a part of that, you work with the client to identify the requirements, and then you give a high-level solution to those requirements, and you propose that this solution implementation is going to take this much of amount of the project. And let's assume that if the client agrees to that description, then they will fund the project, and that's where the funding agreement comes into picture. So the reason for explaining you is that you got to have a project scoped and then a project in itself which has to be funded in order to be created in Oracle projects. And that's what you start in your project management module. So you first create the project, you configure the project, and then you get it approved. And once a project gets approved, the next step is to get it funded through a funding agreement. Once a project gets funded, then you identify the resources as per the project work breakdown structure or a project work plan, and then you assign tasks to each of those individual resources as a project manager. The resources executes those tasks and submit their time and expenses in relation to those execution tasks. So those time and expenses are the ones you capture it in Oracle project costing module. That's one example. There are a lot of things goes into project costing module. So once a resource submits a time, let's say a simple example of submitting a timesheet, he has got to submit those timesheet via Oracle Internet Expenses or via hard copies of those timesheets. Let's assume that the entire solution has been delivered via Oracle eBusiness Suite. So in that case, the resource submits the timesheets via Oracle Internet Expenses. And once the timesheet have been approved by the project manager, they are sucked into Oracle project costing via an integration. That's where project costing comes into picture. Similarly, there are processes for expenses, for supplier requisitions, purchase orders, or hiring external resources, or hiring overseas resources or other miscellaneous project costs, all those are captured in a repository which is maintained in Oracle Project Costing. And the management of entire project is done via Oracle Project Management module, which I'm going to show you a little while later. So that was project management and costing. So where comes the billing? So as soon as you have got the cost, then as a project manager, you add up the predefined margin rates to your costs and expenses, and then you bill it back to the customer. That's where the billing comes into picture. So billing is nothing but invoicing to the customer against a funding agreement, and the customer paying for those invoices in the form of payments, and then you reconcile those payment against the invoices and reducing the open balance of the invoices. So billing works in integration with project costing and Oracle receivables module. It's a smaller module as compared to the costing module. Then comes the project resource management. So where resource management comes, as the name says, managing the resources, which includes identifying the resources, making a resource list, defining the cost of resources, assigning the resources to a project, defining team roles for those resources, and day-to-day management of those resources, which is done in integration with Oracle Project Management module. Then comes Oracle Project Collaboration. So as the name says, collaboration, it helps team members to collaborate within the project with each other, including with the project manager and external team members, which could be team members from a customer side. That's where project collaboration comes into picture. So it helps you communicate team members with each other, and those history of communication are tracked. Then comes Oracle Project Portfolio Analysis. So if you've got multiple projects and you want to analyze those projects and define them as a part of a portfolio, then you can do that in Oracle Project Portfolio Management. It helps you create a portfolio, then combine more than one project into a portfolio, and then analyze those portfolios. So analysis could include analysis on the costing or the margin that you draw out of that with different scenarios, to finally find a optimal scenario that is best as per your organizational objectives, and based on that you generate a quotation or you work with the customers, and based on that you also make your strategies for your future project execution and your resource management. So that's what can be done as a part of Oracle Project Portfolio Analysis. It works in integration with other Oracle Project Management Solution module. Then there are a number of other project related modules such as Oracle Project Contracts and Oracle Project Manufacturing. So if at all you've got manufacturing involved as a part of your project execution, then that project is managed in integration with Oracle Project Manufacturing, and it has got integration with a number of other Oracle modules which are manufacturing related, such as work in process or BOM and so on, or Oracle costing, like that. And Oracle Project Contracts also works in coordination with Oracle Project Manufacturing. It needn't have to be always working with Oracle Project Manufacturing. Project Contract can also work with rest of the Oracle project modules. Then comes the other side, the right hand side. You can see something like business intelligence related application. There used to be some business intelligence in a business suite earlier, but I believe gradually Oracle is moving towards having a separate business intelligence solution, which is in addition to what is provided in eBusiness Suite. It provides you more dashboards, easy to configure reports, and I believe it's more into Oracle's offering in what you called as OBIEE, Oracle Business Intelligence Enterprise Applications. And as a part of that, Oracle Project Analytics is offered, which has got integration with eBusiness Suite projects modules, so data can be sucked from eBusiness Suite in OBIEE and displayed on Oracle Project Analytics dashboards, and the project stakeholders could easily use those dashboards to do analysis on the projects, which includes day-to-day working of the project, day-to-day execution, planning for future, looking at the performance of the project, performance of the resources, and so on. So basically those analysis helps in decision making. Now right at the bottom you would see there are a number of modules or module families which have been listed over here, and a number of Oracle Project Management Suite of modules interact directly with these suite of modules. For example, financials. So financial consists of modules such as payables, receivables, internet expenses, subledger accounting, general ledger, costing, and so on. So Oracle Project Costing and Billing directly integrates with the financial suite of products. For example, if you've got a contractor who want to submit the timesheet, so the contractor logs into Oracle Internet Expenses, submit the timesheet there, and then the timesheets have to be approved by the project manager, and once it has been approved, then it is brought into Oracle Project Costing, and then via an integration a supplier invoice gets generated in Oracle Payables, and then the supplier gets paid via Payables, and Payables ties back again to Project Costing to bring back those invoices and payments at one central repository to capture the cost. So that's where the financial integration comes into picture. Then the HRMS. The HRMS suite of modules lets you define your resources, your resource rates, and managing your complete human resources there. So I'm not going to go much into that, but a simple example could be defining your employees or contractors. So let's say a new contractor comes on board, so you define it over here in HRMS. And HRMS integrates with modules such as Oracle Time and Labor, which lets a contractor to submit the timesheet, and Oracle Internet Expenses, which again lets a contractor to submit their expenses. And those modules are also leveraged for employee timesheets and expenses related activities. But HRMS, as far as employees are concerned, there are a lot more other functionalities that goes with it in terms of payroll. And again, it integrates directly with project costing and project management module, project resource management module. Procurement is more towards the supplier side of activities. So it includes modules such as supplier lifecycle management, sourcing, procurement contracts, purchasing, iSupplier portal, and so on. A simple example of procurement cycle is that if a project manager wants a new contractor, then he goes and raises a requisition in iProcurement, and via that requisition he sends a purchase order to the supplier, and if iSupplier portal is implemented, the supplier can log in into iSupplier portal, looks at the purchase order details, gets a resource based on the project manager request, and assuming that the resource has been interviewed and liked by the project team, he brings him on board, and then the resource starts working on the task assigned by the project manager. And then he submits his time and expenses via internet expenses and Oracle time and labor. And once those time sheets and expenses have been approved, they are paid via Oracle payables. So the payment consists of two parts, invoicing and payment. So the invoicing is something which is something that gets generated automatically based on the timesheet submitted, but suppliers can see it in iSupplier portal, the invoices against those timesheets. And as soon as a payment has been processed against the invoice, that can also be viewed in the iSupplier portal by the supplier. So that's just a simple example, but there are a lot more activities that happens in procurement. If you're interested, I've got a whole lot of courses on procurement end-to-end, so you may want to explore that one as well. Then comes auto management. Auto management is more on the customer side of things, and it integrates more with Oracle project billing and indirectly with project management. For example, for a customer order in relation to services, you may want to create a service contract for that order. So you go and book a sales order and you give a reference of the project that you have created over here and the task number, and then you book that project and it automatically generates a service contract in service contracts module. And then if at all the customer wants to service their product or services against that service contract, then it is referred via the service contract module. And if at all you provide any services, those will be reflected in service contract module, and if the customer will be charged against that services, then that charge will flow via project billing and Oracle receivables. More about that I've explained you in Oracle Service Contracts course. Now what I'll do at this time, since it's becoming a bit more theoretical, let me take you through the end-to-end business process flow of Oracle Enterprise Project Management, wherein I'm also going to refer to a number of forms within Oracle applications, so it'll be more interesting. So that's what is the main process flow as far as Oracle project management is concerned. I guess I've already explained you this project management process flow, but let's go through it one by one, and I'm going to also refer to the forms associated and the responsibilities associated with each of these steps out here. So the first step, as far as project management is concerned, the project manager goes and creates a project in Oracle projects, and once that project gets created, he has got to configure the project based on the project's requirement, then get it activated, and as a next step he has got to define a contract funding agreement and take an approval for funding for the project. As such, the funding is something which is usually comes first. And once a funding has been approved, then it is applied to the newly created project. But in Oracle, this comes as a next step because the funding agreement requires reference to the newly created project. And that's where you got to create the project in this step first. Now let's go into Oracle applications, and I'm going to quickly show you where you create a project and define your funding agreement. So I've just logged in as a super user, and you go to Project Manager, Vision Services Responsibility, and then you go to Project Delivery, and you use this form, create a project, to create a new project. Okay, so that's the place you start creating a project from a template or an existing project. So I'll go back now. Once you have created a project, the next step is creating the funding, and that funding is something you created via a separate responsibility, which I believe is projects Vision Services USA. Yeah, so you go into the agreements, it will open a Java form, and then that's where you create a funding agreement giving a number of details on the form, which includes the agreement number if at all you have, the customer order number, and then you go into the funding to associate the funding to the newly created project. All right. Then the next step is defining the project budget. So once you have defined the project and associated the funding, it's time to define a budget for executing that project, depending on the amount which has been approved in the funding agreement. So that is something a project manager can define it in a separate responsibility, which is he can access it from here, right from going to the project definition, and within project definition he has got to go to the financial tab to define a new project budget. So I'm going to show you in a while. Okay, once you reach at the project list, find your project. Let's say I've defined one called as demo. It's a bit slow when it loads for the first time, but once it loads, then it caches it into the server memory, so then the form's navigation is considerably faster. All right, there you go. And then you go to financials, and then you define the budget over here. Okay, so if you go on to the details of that, you would be able to create a new version of your approved budget, and you can drill down to its detail. You can also import the contents of your budgets from Excel spreadsheets. Anyway, so let's go back. Then the next step is approving resources. So based on the work breakdown structure that has been defined, the project manager will then define team roles and identify the resources and assign the resources to the task and get it approved. So that is done in the work plan of the project, which is something you can see it via the work plan tab. So in my case, I've just defined a simple project breakdown structure, and within that work breakdown structure, okay, let's do this. Okay, there you go. And each of these tasks you go inside as a project manager, and then you assign the resources to the task. There are multiple ways of assigning the resources, but this is one typical way. And there you go to the resources, and within that you give information about the resources including their assignment. Okay, now I'm going to go back to our presentation. The next step is the resource entering the time and expenses. So once a time has been entered by the resources, that time has to be approved, and only then an invoice can be generated automatically in account payables for that time, and the supplier is paid. This is a big cycle in itself. So as far as entering the time is concerned, that is entered via Oracle Internet Expenses Responsibility. And this process flow is something I've shown in my Oracle Project Costing Fundamentals course. So if you go to Internet Expenses, or not Internet Expenses, if you go to Oracle Time and Labor, that is where you can enter the timesheets as an employee or a contractor. So that's the function. Okay, so you can specify the project and task, and that is a big process in itself. Okay, and once a time has been entered, then one can also enter the expenses. So the expenses can either be entered via this responsibility, or there is a separate responsibility for internet expenses. You can see that. Okay, and we can create a new expense report, then have it entered. Once an expense report and time gets entered, they have to be audited and approved. So as far as expense reports are concerned, they must be audited, and that is done through a separate responsibility, which is this Internet Expenses Auditor Vision Services. Once the expenses gets audited, then an invoice gets created automatically in Account Payables module, and that invoice can be viewed in Payables responsibility. So if you go to Payables Vision Services USA, go to Invoices, Entry, and Invoices, it's going to open a separate form here, and you would be able to query that particular invoice using your project or task number. Okay, here. Now let's go back. Then the next step is all about managing requisitions to the suppliers. So the requisitions are created by project manager or the team members in iProcurement module, wherein one can give the reference of the project and task number. So let me take you to the appropriate responsibility. So you go to iProcurement responsibility, which is over here. Alright, and then from this catalog you go and select a predefined item, or you can also order a non-catalog item from here. Or if it is for a contractor, then one can go to this contractor request form and submit the requirement for a contractor. As you could see here, let's say this particular contractor, so it's got a requisition already. For that, a purchase order has been created, and once a PO has been created, then one can view that particular PO in purchasing module, and from the supplier side, the same purchase order can be viewed in iSupplier portal module. So for that, one has to log in into Oracle applications as a supplier, and that is what I have depicted over here. And as soon as you create a requisition, it can be viewed as a commitment in Oracle projects, and that is something I've explained in my Oracle Project Costing Fundamentals course. The requisition gets approved and authorized by the purchasing manager or project manager, whoever is in charge of looking after the requisitions. Usually for a project, it is the project manager. And then you issue a non-production purchase order to the supplier that can be viewed by the supplier in iSupplier portal module, if at all that is implemented. And then the supplier will provide the non-production goods and services against the requisition. And that can be received by the person who has placed the requisition, which is also called as a requisitioner, via something called as desktop receiving functionality through iProcurement responsibility here. Okay, you can see that receive items, and if at all there are any defects in the item, that can be returned via return items functionality. So that completes the purchase and receiving process. Then the next process is payment against that invoices. The payment part is pretty much similar to what we understood over here in terms of paying for timesheets and expenses. So the invoice can either be submitted by the supplier via iSupplier portal module, or it can be automatically generated as soon as the receiving is completed. It depends on the setup and configuration of how you have done it. Both the functionality are supported in Oracle applications. Once the invoice has been created, then it is paid, and the supplier can view it in iSupplier portal module, and that invoice can as well be reflected back in Oracle projects in the costing module as a project expenditure. So all this have depicted the details about the costing and expenses of the project. But that is as far as the project execution is concerned. And all that you're doing it against a project funding agreement, is it not? So what happens is, as a next step, once the expenses, or as and when the expenses keeps coming in, and depending on your project work plan, your financial plan, what has been agreed with the customer, the project manager will then generate the invoices and send it to the customer for payment. These invoices will contain the same expenditure, but in addition to that, some margin would be added. Usually that margin could be anywhere between 15 to 30%. And then the customer receives the invoices, review the invoices, and makes a payment against that invoices. That process is done via Oracle billing module. In other words, creation of invoices against the project. And then billing works in integration with Oracle receivables module, which lets you track entire receivable activities against those billing. So the invoice that get generated from billing can be viewed in receivables and can be communicated to the customer via receivables. And once a customer makes a payment, then the invoice payment can be matched to the invoice to reduce the balance, and it can then be brought back into project billing, and that payment would be reflected against the project invoice, and the whole loop will get closed then. So various responsibilities which goes into this activities, you can either define separate billing responsibilities, or it is something which is also built as a part of standard responsibilities as well in Oracle projects. So those standard responsibilities includes project manager, Vision Services USA, or project Vision Services USA responsibility. And the receivables responsibilities in this case includes receivables Vision Services USA. So let's see where it is, this one. And you can view the invoice over here in transactions and transactions, which is going to open a form-based UI. And this process is something I've detailed in my course in Oracle Project Billing module. Okay, so the invoice can be viewed here, the customer information can be viewed here, and once a customer makes the payment, then the total outstanding balance will reduce based on the payment made, and the payment details will also be reflected over here. Plus the payment can be viewed against the receipts out here. And there are so much other functionalities that goes in receivables module, so I'm not going to explain you now. For example, if the volume of payments are high, then you can implement something called as lockbox interface, wherein you can receive a file from the customer in the form of a text file or a tab delimited file or a comma delimited file that you can suck into receivables to process the payments, apply to the invoices, and then you can tie back to Oracle Project Billing module to close the cycle. So that's how it works. Then the last step is managing the performance of the project, which is like BAU, business as usual, wherein the project manager looks after the project, looks the resources are performing, the performance, whether the project is going through the critical path or not, and if at all any actions have to be taken, any issues have to be resolved, and if at all the customer has changed the scope, then he may end up in raising a change request. So those issues and change control requests can also be managed in Oracle Project Management module, which I have explained in much more detail in my course. So if I go back to our project manager workbench, which is the responsibility project manager Vision Services USA, then look for project list, and then open the project. And then you have to go to control, and you can see things like issues and change requests. So that's where one can create new issues or change requests. If at all this is change request, one can do further things like an analysis of those change requests and so on. Again, those are the things I'm going to explain you as we go along in the course, so I'm going to skip that as of now. Now the last thing over here is the project performance that can be managed as a part of Oracle Project Enterprise solution, or that is something which one can analyze it further via OBIE, Oracle Project Analytics solution. I would recommend Oracle Project Analytics solution, which has got much more functionalities as compared to what comes out of the box in Oracle Enterprise Project Management solution. So that's in summary the whole end-to-end Oracle Enterprise Project Management solution. But each of these modules have got separate courses that I have delivered exhaustively, so feel free to take my courses as you like, and at the end of all these courses you would have a pretty good knowledge of entire end-to-end enterprise project management.